From training to performing, join our big league conversation. Welcome to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast with your host, Eric Cressy.
Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressy, and this is episode 44. Today's guest is a good friend of mine, and she brings a wealth of information from the mobility world that'll benefit not just baseball athletes, but athletes from all walks of life. So we're really excited for a great show. This episode is brought to you by Athletic Greens. It's an all-in-one superfood supplement with 75 whole food sourced ingredients to support your body's nutritional needs across 5 critical areas: energy, immunity, gut health, hormonal support, and healthy aging. I'm an avid user of Athletic Greens myself, in spite of the fact that I tend to be a supplement minimalist. To me, this is a product that is much more like whole food nutritional insurance as opposed to a true supplement. The ingredients have been carefully selected at the highest quality, most natural source. You get essential vitamins and minerals, digestive enzymes, prebiotics, probiotics, and that's the zero compromise approach from the company. It's plant-based, sourced from whole foods at the highest quality, so you won't find harmful chemicals, artificial colors or flavors, preservatives, or added sugar. Really, it's perfect for folks who are gluten and dairy-free, paleo, keto, vegan-friendly, great for people who are intermittent fasting, all that fun stuff. Personally, I love it for obviously our athletes who don't get enough nutritional benefits from fruits and vegetables because they don't eat enough. So it's a way to kind of plug in holes in diets. But also, I really like it for our college and professional athletes who may have complex travel schedules where quality food options aren't always at hand. On a personal level, I'm a husband, father of 3, and an entrepreneur. We split our time between 2 states, and I'm also still an avid lifter. So life is inherently crazy, and it can be stressful, and sleep deprivation is definitely something that we encounter. So I rely on Athletic Greens for part of my immune support, and believe firmly that it's made a big difference in keeping me healthy in spite of how crazy our lifestyle is. They've got a great offer in place. If you head to athleticgreens.com/Cressy, they'll get you 20 free travel packets with your purchase. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Cressy, CRESSEY, and you can claim your special offer. Today's guest is known as the Mobility Maker. She has experience training athletes and teams in MLB, the NHL, the NBA, NFL, MLS, PGA, WTA, and WWE, as well as tactical athletes from the military, special forces, first responders, and veterans. As an author, she's written dozens of published articles, as well as the book Practical Solutions for Back Pain Relief. Additionally, she presents worldwide at popular strength and conditioning and sports and fitness events, including the highly regarded Perform Better Tour. As an expert on the integration of mobility, breathing biomechanics, and recovery in professional sports, she's been invited to speak at the Major League Baseball Strength Coaches Winter Meetings, as well as professional golf venues, including TPC and the World Golf Fitness Summit. She also conducts in-service presentations on a variety of health and wellness topics for private organizations, ranging from not-for-profits to the Fortune 500 corporations. She graduated from Tufts University, is a certified strength and conditioning coach through the NSCA, and has received extensive education through the Postural Restoration Institute. She also has certifications and trainings with the Titleist Performance Institute, Functional Movement Systems, the American College of Sports Medicine, and the National Academy of Sports Medicine. She's an experienced registered yoga teacher and educator through the Yoga Alliance. In addition to her ongoing role with CNN Health, she's a recurring on-air fitness expert for the nationally syndicated morning show Daytime, as well as Tampa Bay's News 9. Please welcome to the show, Dana Santos. Dana, thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Oh, I'm excited. Thank you.
I am too. This is going to be awesome because we've known each other. Man, I remember you coming to the original CSP, so it's been like over 10 years, and I've obviously become an avid reader of your stuff and follower of all your videos on social media, everything. But I think it's cool to have these conversations where you start to like delve deeper into philosophies and how careers evolved and stuff. So I'm looking forward to this.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And just to make the point, I did move to Florida before you. So you followed me
did.
here. Yes.
And your blood
Yes.
probably thinned out much more sooner than mine did, because now it's like, it went under 60 degrees today and it was like Armageddon down here. People were panicking and I was kind of agreeing with them with it.
Yeah, no, I've adapted for sure, because I was like, it's freezing. I don't want to stand out here.
All right. So let's dig into this right away. So I know things started for you with an exposure to yoga, But the work that you put out there is so much more deep than that. It goes in so many different directions and it unifies a lot of philosophies. So I'm curious, what initially drew you to yoga? Was there an injury that sent you in that direction? Was it something you looked at for different reasons? How did you get into it?
Well, I had been a gymnast early in my life, and so I found it appealing for that reason. But the primary reason was I had a completely different career when I found yoga. I was North American Director of Marketing and PR for an international corporate real estate firm.
Wow.
And it was really high stress. I mean, I traveled all the time. I worked constantly. But I'm just naturally a type A personality and well, not as much now, thankfully, but I was wound really frickin' tight. So I never paused. I never paused for anything. My life was like a race. And it was actually on a business trip, one of the many. I was always on planes. And thankfully though, I stayed at like these super nice hotels so that, and like every Ritz-Carlton has a spa with yoga classes. And my first yoga class, I think it was a Ritz-Carlton in Miami or something like that. And it was really weird and like frou-frou, but moving my body in ways that I hadn't, since I was a kid actually felt good. But then at the very end, the thing that appealed to me the most was the thing that I pretty much had spent most of my adult life running from, which was silence. And so you had to just lay there and you couldn't work on anything, right? You couldn't do anything. You just had to lay there and focus on your breath. And I never had any idea how important breathing would become in my life. But in that moment, I was a different person. And now I'm going to sound like a frou-frou, like yoga person, right? But in that moment, I actually found some sense of clarity and then I wanted more because remember the type A personality is like, oh, this is good. I need like 3,000 times as much of this in my life. So then I decided, in my spare time, which I had none of, because I couldn't just do yoga because, the typical type A, you can't just do yoga. You have to be the best at yoga, which was kind of the antithesis of the whole philosophy behind it. But I decided, I was going to teach it. And when I realized that my life was kind of backwards was when here I had, this super high 6-figure job that I was working, but I was making, $35 an hour, I think, and that's pretty high, at Boston Sports Club teaching yoga classes. I was moving around business trips, like, to Hawaii or wherever, because I didn't want to miss the classes I was supposed to be teaching at the Boston Sports Club. And so there came a point when I had to really look at that and say, hey, wait a minute. Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? And it wasn't that I wasn't good at marketing and PR. I mean, I was good at it, and I did enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it in the context of the work that I was like corporate real estate. Like I've been to parties at Trump's house and just the people the circles I was in, they weren't really my people. The circles I'm in now, holy crap, totally my people. Eric, you're my person. Like I've got all my people. So it helped me find my people, find my calling, find everything, that really matters to me. And it came out of that. Now that yoga that I learned in that class that day is not, and even the yoga that I learned in the yoga, I don't know, the yoga teacher's course. Well, it was the certification through Yoga Alliance. And back then, because at this point, I can't believe it's been like almost 20 years that I've been doing this. And back then, the Yoga Alliance, and I'm sure people who are familiar with yoga certification know there's like 200 hour and 500 hour. You have to do it all now through one school. Yeah. But 2 decades ago, they actually allowed you to piece it together. There are certain components like 20 hours of anatomy and, 30 hours of something else. I can't even remember now.
But it's more than the fitness industry, so that is a feather in their cap.
Yeah, a little bit, except let me qualify that. When I say 20 hours, I think it's 26 hours of anatomy. You can't see me, but I'm putting air quotes around that because it's very subjective. If they want to focus the entire time on chakras, 26 hours, they absolutely can. And so if you have someone who's been trained in 26 hours of chakra anatomy, who then is also doing, because in yoga, they adjust people. They've had no anatomy and biomechanics training, but they're pushing people into poses, but they definitely know, what color your solar plexus is. So that's helpful. So
Yeah.
there's a lot that didn't fit in
Yeah.
as my career evolved and when I took this to sports, for sure.
Interesting. So I'm curious, obviously you got going, you evolved. What led to the transition into working with higher level athletes? Like, how did that come about?
Well, I'm going to be completely honest and give you the good and the bad. So I did love sports and I was fascinated with sports. And as I said, like being able to move my body, during a yoga class really made me start to appreciate that, where I'd kind of lost that. Because in gymnastics, I loved it. You feel powerful there and capable and things that you can do with it. And that's what I loved about watching sports. And so then I started to think, wow, there's an application here. And you'll love this because it's actually, I was on a business trip and I'm staying at the same hotel as the New York Yankees. How ironic. And the irony there was I was actually taking clients to, Camden Yards to a Red Sox game. The Red Sox were playing Baltimore, but I had I wasn't connected in professional sports back then. And so I didn't have connections to get decent tickets at Fenway. So instead it was cheaper for me to fly clients to Camden Yards. Yeah, and that's a beautiful park. Anyway, so I was there for that. But when the Red Sox left, then the Yankees came in and I still had some other work that I was doing in town. So I was staying at the same hotel and I like literally bumped right into Derek Jeter in the lobby. And later on though, they invited me to a dinner. It was Derek and Jorge Posada and I want to say like Hideki Matsui was there. It was like those Yankees. Remember that like era of Yankees? And I didn't have a whole lot to talk, about with them, but I wanted to make this like a useful conversation to me as well. So I started talking to Jorge about what do you do? I mean, you sit in that position because for those people who don't know who Jorge Posada is, he was a catcher for the Yankees. He was a really good catcher for the Yankees. And I was like, you sit in that position for, like 3 hours. What do you do to keep your hips healthy? And next thing you know, we're on the floor, like doing these hip opening, like I'm showing him what I learned in yoga. Cause I just had like this nerd level, fascination with how bodies worked. And Jorge and Derek, pretty much told me that they didn't back then. There wasn't anything besides like team stretch. And if you've ever seen team stretch, even now, sometimes it's a joke, right? Not as much for sure. It's evolved, but I know when I first got into this, like team stretch is the guys just sitting out there, like talking to each other, barely paying attention to what's going on. There wasn't a whole lot going on. And there wasn't anything like mobility wasn't even a term back then that got thrown around. You remember?
Yeah.
So that kind of planted the seed for me. Then I remember on the flight back, and it's a short flight back from Baltimore to Boston, but I remember on the flight back, like furiously writing all of this stuff out, all of these ideas about like, how do I bring sports, not just baseball? Like now I'm thinking about goaltenders and, the NBA and just, my brain was like on fire. And I was really excited about it. And then I said I'd explain the good and the bad. That's the good part, the nerd level interest and wanting to help them move better. The bad part though was I was like, oh, pro athletes, because remember I had this high 6-figure income. If I'm going to leave that job, I've got to make a ton of money. I'd already done a business plan. I remember type A personality. I'd done a business plan for opening a yoga studio and it was going to take me 3 years to start making money. And then it was like $35,000 the first year.
Yep.
And So I had already scrapped that plan. I couldn't leave my job for that, but I was like, oh, pro athletes, totally misconstrued how this all worked. I had no idea, right? I had never working in professional sports.
Yeah.
I didn't know the dichotomy between what athletes were paid and what was actually being spent on strength and conditioning, which was next to nothing. There were they had no budgets to bring me in, very little budgets at that point to bring me in. And also most pro athletes, expect things for free. They expected back then, again, things have changed so much over the
Yeah.
past 2 decades, but
Yeah.
they expected things for free. So
It's a service economy, like you think about, I always tell people, like, no one ever goes into Walmart and bargains for a pack of gum. But when it comes
yes,
to paying for a service, everything is negotiable in this world, unfortunately. So you have to be careful not to devalue yourself early in a career. Otherwise you're kind of up a creek without a paddle for the rest of the 30 years that follow.
for sure. And I did find my creek without a paddle, but thankfully I made it. But yeah, I did end up in a spot there because, it's so funny. I went through all the due diligence of a business plan for a yoga studio. But then when I got excited about this, decided, oh yeah, this makes perfect sense. No
Yeah.
plan. I'm just going to do this. I'm going to cash in my 401k and I am going to write a book about yoga because again, type A personality. I'm
Yeah.
like, I need a platform. I still had this marketing background and I knew in order to have like instant credibility, I had to have some sort of platform. So, so in the beginning, there was some smoke and mirrors in terms of making myself credible. So I wrote this book that no one should ever read now, but back then it was, the essence of my expertise at the time, and which, as we've already discussed, has evolved. And so I'll tell you the name of it in case anyone wants to pay the extraordinary amount that some people are charging on like eBay for a signed copy of it. Just don't do it. But it's called Yoga is Not One Size Fits All. I had a different last name though, so maybe you won't be able to find it. But anyway, so I did this book, which then ended up being like a really expensive brochure in the end because I used it to market my services to all four the major sports, the NFL, NHL, NBA, and MLB. And I wrote personal letters to 6 people on every single team in all four of those sports. I don't think I slept for like 3 weeks after I did this while I did this because so I found 3 players on every team that were valuable to the team, but had enough of an injury history or like some kind of issues that I could find. And this was back when the internet still made it sound like a fax machine. So this took time. Do you remember like dial up? Like
Oh my
we,
gosh. It's
yeah,
crazy.
yes, we still had like AOL, right? So it took a while to find all this information, but I wanted my introduction to each of these people to be as warm as possible. So I found out where they went to school. Like I was trying to connect the dots, how many degrees between me and Kevin Bacon kind of thing, And I sent these individualized letters with pages earmarked in my book, of potential exercises for them. Like I had the right idea. And again, I was working with and here's the air quotes again, you can't see expertise that I had at that time. And in marketing, because I've been doing that for my whole adult life, was the return, a direct mail return of 4% is considered a success. I was at 37%.
That's great.
My
Wow.
phone just started ringing. The first person to call me was Terry Francona. And I thought it was a joke because, having been a Boston Red Sox fan for so long, we kind of knew his like distinct voice. Some of my friends knew what I was up to, and everybody thought I was a lunatic. And so I thought someone was calling me and like pretending to be Terry Francona.
Yeah.
So I can't repeat because I'm sure you have a nice clean podcast. I can't repeat what my first words to Terry Francona were. But it's a miracle that I ended up working with him because he was like, excuse me. Yeah, I didn't think it was him. But anyway, so I ended up working with all of the 4 teams in Boston. And then also the Rays flew me down for spring training. And if people are like, how did this happen? It was because, well, A, I had the guts to, knock on all these doors, right?
Yeah.
B, and people remarked about, like, I didn't send them some super long letter, but
Yeah.
all the content in my letter to each of them was individual. This wasn't
Yeah.
a form letter. This was, this is what I know about you. This is where I think I might be able to add value. I wasn't saying, hey, and I've seen some of these letters because coaches have given them
Yeah.
to me. I wasn't saying, hey, if you do yoga with me, I'll add 10 miles per hour to your fastball,
Yeah.
which is, it was nothing like this. It wasn't crazy claims. And doors just started opening. And the
Yeah.
more doors opened, the more I learned. And
Yeah.
you don't know what you don't know, but
Mm-hmm.
I was finding out that there was a whole lot that I didn't know. I
Yeah.
didn't understand the demands on these athletes like
Yeah.
beyond what you see on the field.
Mm-hmm.
And I found out very quickly, like within the first year of
Mm-hmm.
doing this, that traditional yoga did not fit. It just did
Yeah.
not fit because it's typically an hour to 90-minute class
Mm-hmm.
setting, right? And
Yeah.
the only like sport specific idea that anybody had been applying to yoga, and I was guilty of this too, and
Mm-hmm.
people still do this now, but was, hey, this yoga pose looks like what that athlete's doing, so that means that they should do this,
Yeah.
right? Like, look at this warrior two. It looks like a pitching stride.
Yeah.
So pitchers should all do this. And that's such BS, right?
Yeah.
But I got away with that in the beginning because it was so novel. I mean, no one
Yeah.
was really doing yoga with athletes. So
I think
I might as well
that's like a
go
huge,
ahead.
not to cut you off, but like such an important lesson there. Like is, first mover advantage is obviously important, but I think we also have to recognize that like successful people find value in unexpected places. You know what I mean? Like there were yoga studios all around Boston. No one had actually thought to take this and apply it to professional athletes. Like nowadays, if you write those letters, I mean, I'm sure that they get 500 of them a day. I mean, I get them. I
Yeah.
mean, I got an email today from a workers' comp attorney that wanted to talk to our pro crowd. And then also we had a guy that dropped off cards in the office for a car deal detailing place for our pro athletes. Like it's just like constant bombardment, but like you stood out because you had the foresight to put that out there, but you also did it. And this is probably the most important lesson, with a ton of humility. You didn't come in saying, I know everything. You say, I'm a hard worker. I think I have a good idea. I'd like to offer something to you. And then you continuously learn and refine your approaches as opposed to like just coming in guns a-blazing like you own the place,
Yeah.
There's
Yeah,
so
that's true.
much to know there.
I think not sometimes, too often, what happens is when someone feels like they feel, I'm not coming up with the right word, but you'll get it, like nervous about the fact that they don't know enough
Yeah.
to really add enough value. Instead, they fake it. And I hate that fake it till you make it thing. I hate that, right? Because that they come in with kind of a chip on their shoulder,
Mm-hmm.
like they have something to prove because they're afraid that they really don't have anything to prove.
Yeah.
Like they don't have anything to offer. And I think that's a huge mistake because there is so much value into coming in just the way that you've said, where it's like, you know what? I think there's value here, but I'm not going to know how much value I can offer you until we collaborate on this, until you show
Yeah.
me what you need, not me coming in, guessing what you need and saying that I can fix it, or coming in and telling you that things are broken and I'm here to fix them. That's the worst approach you can take, but so many people take that approach because they think that they're going to be embraced as the savior when and this was something I learned really early on, is there are so many hands in in an athlete's program. There's so many different aspects of it. And then also there are all these strange dynamics, like, do the athletic trainers actually talk to the strength coaches? Do they collaborate? Some teams, they collaborate really well. Other teams, it's like, and now I'm really dating myself, but one of the strength coaches described it, their team, as saying it's like the Hatfields and McCoys, right? The
Yeah.
athletic trainers and the strength coaches, they
Mm-hmm.
don't talk at all. They don't get along.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand any of those dynamics, but you have to know that there are going to be different dynamics in every team that you go into.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to feel those dynamics out and where you fit and make sure that you walk a fine line. You don't step on toes. And, now being in sports for so long, we have all these different terms for it, but like having feel or
Yeah.
court awareness or,
Yeah.
and I inadvertently had that. Now,
Hmm.
I work hard to make sure that
Yeah.
I maintain that,
Yeah.
but that was, and Kevin Barr, who was the strength, he's now
Yeah.
at the Marlins, but he was the
KB.
strength coach. Yes, KB at the Rays. He's the one, who gave me my big break in
Yeah.
spring training. But one of the things that he said early on, to me, and then when he introduced me to other strength coaches, was he just kept saying, she gets it. She has
Yeah.
feel. Like, so they weren't afraid to let me into the weight room.
Yeah. And I actually I think that's a good detour to take in this. And I don't want to spend, a million minutes on it just because I think we have a million things to cover. But like, you obviously were one of the first women in professional baseball. And like, that's a huge feather in your cap. What do you think were the person? I mean, was it the personality characteristics you had that made you successful? Was it that you were bringing something unique? Because we both know, like, it's not easy to walk into that locker room as anybody. It's particularly hard to walk in as a female in really like the early 2000s when, you're walking in as, the only female in the room and you're doing it with something that they haven't necessarily seen before. What do you think made you successful? Like, I know it blew me away when I met you, but I'm curious as to like what your takeaways were.
Well, as much as I told you that in corporate real estate, those weren't my people.
Mm-hmm.
I was one of the only women, that,
Really?
that
Okay.
could really, yeah, one of the
Yeah.
only women, especially like in an executive position. And I tended to be one of the only women in the room, definitely on the golf course, which was like kind of like a novelty. And so I ended up playing a lot more golf, when we were kind of doing deals
Mm-hmm.
because it was a novelty. I didn't want to be treated that way, but it was like, you're a woman who can be out on the golf course,
Yeah.
play a decent game, at least know when to pick your ball up,
Yeah.
but play a decent
Yeah.
game, but then also, speak intelligently about leases and everything
Mm-hmm.
that we were selling. And, and so, and being around those guys, it's like being in a locker room
Yeah.
there's no question. And
Mm-hmm.
so I had to really have a thick skin. I had to be able to dish it out as much as I took it,
Mm-hmm.
and so I ended up
Yeah.
being more like one of the guys. I was
Yeah.
always a tomboy,
Yeah.
but I have a thick skin.
Mm-hmm.
You have to, I mean, I don't let anyone disrespect me. And that's
Yeah.
part of also having a thick skin, being able, standing up for yourself.
Yeah.
I don't, take it and then leave the room and go complain about it. If
Mm-hmm.
something is inappropriate that happens, I speak up right then and there because it's
Yep.
like, I'm here, to help you. If you don't want to be here, like when I'm working with a group of players, if you don't want to be here working with me,
Mm-hmm.
and you've been told it's mandatory, then you've got to suck it up. But
Yep.
there's no reason to be disrespectful. And if you can't like manage, then you've got to go. And I don't want to give people the impression that happens very often. I could say in the past almost 20 years, it's happened, 2 or 3 times where I have
Yep.
thrown people out of the room, but I'll do it. And
Yep.
then and when people are acting like idiots, like idiots, like playful, not paying
Yeah.
attention. But I've got some people who are really serious that I'm trying to work with. I'll call
Yeah.
them out, but I do it in a way that kind of shames them, but in
Yep.
a fun, like
Yep.
people don't realize you can earn respect by, in this kind of environment by not being afraid to
Yeah.
call people out
Mm-hmm.
and make fun of yourself too. Never take yourself too seriously.
Yeah.
So I think it was all of those kind of things, that I just kind of fit in
Yeah.
where they didn't, I don't look like I'm supposed to fit in. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But I never felt out of place.
That's awesome. And it's funny. I think about this stuff way more than I used to. And to some degree, I'm ashamed of that because now I have 3 daughters who are under 5 and I want to make sure that they have those opportunities. It's an audiobook recommendation, but Power Moves, by Adam Grant is actually it's an Audible only that he did. And he talked a lot about like, what can we do to help women get into positions like this? And, I love that KB did like the warm intro for you and help like kind of smooth things over. Cause I think that's important. It's always an easier first step to take if you've got someone who's pulling in the same direction as you are and singing your praise on the front end. So, I think that's important. And, as we see more and more women, getting into professional baseball, like I think, me and everybody else who are males in that industry need to do a good job of kind of like helping to pave that path a little bit easier, because there's some really bright females who can contribute a lot in this industry. So, that's a very helpful story. So I'm curious, we're going to kind of take that detour and go in a different direction. Let's talk about the most common mistakes you see with respect to yoga in an athletic population or any population. Like, I know you could probably go on for hours on this one because we've had some good conversations. So I'm going to just open the floodgates and let you have at it.
All right. Well, you had me write that blog for
Yeah.
you. So
Yeah.
we've got that blog too.
Yeah.
But I'm not letting you move on yet, Eric,
Yeah.
because
Okay. Go.
you dropped something, and
Yeah.
then I need to come back to it
Yeah.
because you said, well, you said something about when
Oh
you
yeah.
met me, what blew you away. You
Yeah.
can't say that and not tell me
Oh
what it
yeah.
was.
Totally. The thing that impressed me the most, you were totally unfazed about your surroundings. Cause I remember you came in, you did kind of like a demo for some of our pro guys, and, you were working with some of our guys who were, they were tighter than a camel's butt in a sandstorm. And there was like Rage Against the Machine blaring. Like, I think you were on the turf and guys were like sprinting by you, and, there's 450-pound deadlifts being dropped and stuff like that. And you just like owned the environment. It was like you were just in the zone. There was nothing else going on there. I was like, man, she gets it. Like, she's not like a deer in headlights at all. And it was super impressive to see someone, because, we always see like male and female, like new interns come into a new environment. They don't want to overcoach, because they're afraid of becoming like Captain Correction. And then, at the other end of the spectrum, they don't want to let terrible movement go and look like they're undercoaching. And it's a balancing act to be in that position. And it was so impressive to see how you captured people's attention. You related to them, but you did it in an environment that was not at all what we would consider mobility / yoga friendly. You know what I mean? So that impressed me most. You got it, as KB would say.
Well, I really appreciate that. And actually that is a nice transition then
Yeah.
into, some of the common mistakes I see
Yeah.
is, so yoga is typically done in a yoga studio. And as soon as you think about a yoga studio, it conjures an image of, the, pristine wood floors and the quiet with the soft music and the gong thing, whatever, there's probably a name for that. And, like bells and singing bowls and eye pillows. And when people come into professional sports and they try to recreate an environment like that, or they expect that they're going to have an environment like that, they're going to be really disappointed, very disappointed. I mean, my first session with Terry Francona at the Red Sox, we were in the training room, and hopefully they've updated some of the stuff in Fenway because it was the size of a closet, and we were on the floor working on stuff. They weren't walking around us, Eric. They were stepping over us. There were people and this was my first real session with someone in professional sports. And yeah, that was illuminating for sure. And then there have been times that I've been, out with the Pirates, early on in my career too, and I learned a lot of lessons from this, but we would be out in the batting cages that have a tin roof. And I've got 120, no lie, it would be FIL. They would throw everybody from FIL out into the batting cages. Now, I did bring an assistant with me, but it was still 120 guys, and at least, 50 of them didn't speak English. And now it's pouring rain on a tin roof.
Oh my goodness.
You know yes. I would leave Bradenton, and I couldn't talk for 3 days because I had to yell the whole time and I'd completely lose my voice. So yeah, you coming in and expecting that you're going to recreate a yoga environment in any way, shape, or form in pro sports is just, you've got to let that go. And I think that is a common mistake, because then, you expect that you'll have a special room. I mean, I'm in hallways, I'm in the corners of weight rooms where the music is so loud, your chest is rattling. It's like you're at a concert. So yeah, there's that. But but then it's also like having a set plan, because that's another thing. They teach you this in yoga teacher training. You draw out all of the poses you're going to do in your class. And I think it's wrong even with the general population, probably even more so with the general population, that they do this, because you've got a group of all different bodies with all different injury histories, and you don't know what those are. And you're setting up a class. You don't know who's going to show up in your class, and you're setting up a class with all of these poses that you're picking arbitrarily. And for an hour, you've got the set amount of time. There are no set amounts of time in professional sports, right? You come in and they say, yeah, we've given you this hour block. And then you show up and, oh, well, we've got 3 meetings plus we're running late. So you've got 20 minutes. So what would the person who had written out all of their poses that they're going to do for 60 minutes, now what are you going to do in 20 minutes so that you add value? So I don't ever plan, like write out some plan of what I'm going to do. I have to see who shows up, not just who shows up, but what's the energy in that room? What did they do before they showed up? Like, were they just out running sprints because they got in trouble? Because that can happen, right? And then they had to run the sprint, especially with the younger guys. I'm not talking about the major leaguer. Well, sometimes. But like, what is the attitude in the room? It's really so much more about context. But then there are so many traditional yoga poses. I know that Bikram is super popular still, even with that documentary out. And I think it's popular with athletes because, it feels difficult to do. But just because something feels difficult to do does not mean that it's good for you. And when it's true Bikram yoga, it's hot yoga, that it's 105 degrees. By the way, if you stand and I've taught Bikram before, only because I was doing a favor for someone, not because I like it. And but if you stand in that room and don't move in 105 degrees, you're going to sweat bullets, like it's not, and you're going to feel like you're doing something. So you have to recognize that 105 degrees is going to have that effect on you, whether you're moving or not. But now there's 26 arbitrary poses that this little absolute jerk of a man, like an egomaniac, came up with, who he doesn't seem to have any training in biomechanics. I mean, he was raised doing yoga, and there are at least 3 of them that I just don't even think human beings should do. There's one, it's like called rabbit, and you put it's extreme flexion of your cervical spine, and then you're putting your body weight on it. Why?
No.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
No. So I mean, there are so many mistakes that are made, but I think it's really trying to make traditional yoga fit sports, or vice versa. It's actually when you're trying to make the sports environment fit traditional yoga, that doesn't work. So, and there isn't to say that there isn't value in yoga poses, but if you look at any mobility type of work, any styles of corrective exercises, any kind of mobility, you can find a basis in yoga poses, right? Like you can say, oh, that looks very much like this. And there's a very good chance that these movements did originate from a yoga pose, but then they became movements as opposed to poses. And I think the also coming out of and into the position is just as important, if not more, than the position itself. And in a lot of traditional yoga, it's a static posture, and it's about holding the posture. And then if it isn't the static type of posture, then it's a flowing series of poses. But then it becomes about the flow and less about, are you executing each exercise effectively? And I think that was my big issue with yoga, is if I try to take any of those traditional styles and make them work, when you're flowing through positions, you can be compensating and missing parts of the exercise. If you're just holding a static pose does not necessarily translate to better movement. So I needed to take what worked out of yoga and then make it work better for sports.
To that end, one of the things I've really liked about your work is you've been exposed to a lot of different philosophies and you pulled them together to create your own unique approach. So for the yoga instructors who are listening to this and other coaches who want to be informed consumers in that regard, what competencies were game changers for you? What should people be exposed to develop a well-rounded approach in the same way you have?
Well, if they want to go through everything that I have, I would say though that the first thing that really changed my approach, and it happened while I was down here for spring training with the Rays, so it's super early on in my career, was learning about who Gray Cook was, because I knew the yoga world. I didn't know the world, that we reside in now. And so FMS, and it was his first book, I think. What is it? Athletic Body in Motion. Does that sounds right?
It was In Balance, I think it was.
In Balance.
Yeah, either way.
Okay. Yeah. Athletic Body in Balance.
I remember seeing that in grad school. I think that was like 03-ish. I saw it for the first time. So yeah.
Yeah. So that would have been probably maybe 04, 05 for me. And it was Tim Maxey, who is now head of strength and conditioning for all of MLB, Major League Baseball, right? He was with the Indians, and the Indians still had spring training in Florida back then.
Yeah.
And so when I went to go see him, he said, "Have you heard of Gray Cook?" And I was like, I have no idea who that is. Yeah, at that time. And I think he showed me this book, and as I'm flipping through it, just like what I was saying before, these look like yoga poses. Like his corrective exercises looked like yoga poses, but then when I read the text that went with them, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what makes sense. This is the application and execution that makes so much more sense than a pose for the sake of a pose, a flow for the sake of a flow, that kind of thing that is part of yoga. And so, and back then we didn't have Amazon Prime. Thankfully, I was down here for 3 weeks. So it took a while Amazon existed. I ordered it on Amazon, had it sent to my hotel, and I read it before I left. And I would say that was the first, because there have been so many game changers over the course of the evolution of my career, but that was definitely the first. And that really changed things for me. And then because I hadn't even thought about assessment, Eric, it wasn't even on my radar, because that wasn't something that they taught you in yoga. And so I created my own assessment. I think next after that, I did like NASM, optimum performance training, because I had worked with the Celtics, and back then it was the Charlotte Bobcats, right? Or because now it's the Hornets.
It was the Hornets, and I think it went to the Bobcats, and now it's the New Orleans, right? Hornets. I can't remember.
Oh, geez.
I'm terrible.
Right. So, but it was Emeka Okafor, right? From he was on that team. He was a Husky too.
UConn Husky, just like me. Yep.
Yeah, there you go. So, and talking to his strength coach at the time, he said that in the NBA, NASM was what most of the strength coaches were back then. So I was like, all right, I have to look into that. So I got NASM certified as a personal trainer, and but then I did NASM optimum performance training, which also taught me about assessment. I hadn't done FMS yet then, but I'd read the book. So I created my own kind of assessment, which now it's silly if I look back at that, because it would take me over an hour to assess people. And now I do my best assessing in the first 5 minutes, just talking to them before they know that I'm assessing them, because then I can see how they hold their body and how they're breathing and how they're moving naturally. And then I can decide what movements I really need to look at.
It's got to be subjective before it's objective. I feel like that's a really overlooked thing. You've got to build rapport and get to know them before you can start worrying about 41 degrees of hip internal rotation,
For sure. Yeah. And then TPI, I really found them to have a fantastic assessment. Like, I love the TPI assessment. And so I'm super excited because, I told you this, that I'm doing the on base U,
Yeah, absolutely.
stuff in a couple of weeks. I'm doing the pitching and hitting. So I'm
Yeah,
really excited to see what, Greg Rose has done with that. He's
yeah,
brilliant.
they're
So
outstanding. Actually, Greg's going to be
yeah.
a guest here really soon too, so you're in good company.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm definitely in good company. Your roster of people who've done this are amazing.
I'm
But then,
I'm out kicking my coverage pretty good with this podcast so far.
yeah. Well, I think Eric, you can hold your own. Everybody wants you on their podcast too,
Well, I
for
appreciate it.
sure.
Where do you think the unique? I mean, obviously, those speak to general philosophies, right? Like FMS has been used in NFL, it's been used in NHL, and obviously in baseball components. TPI originated in the golf worlds. What are the challenges that you face working with baseball in the context of mobility? And like, I know things that I think through, but I'm not teaching mobility classes, right? I'm bouncing around the floor as a strength and conditioning coach and, doing some field development people in conjunction with hitting and pitching guys. Where do you kind of see the biggest challenges in your work day to day with them? What do you have to avoid? What do you have to be cautious about how you coach?
Well, I mean, there are a whole host of challenges. One of the first ones is just finding a women's bathroom in any of these places. Usually it's like a different building and a mile
Yeah.
away, so that's unique to me.
Yeah.
But thankfully, like you said, many more women are coming in, so it's getting better. There are even locker rooms sometimes. But one of the biggest challenges is when it's a group. Now, and I don't want to, we've talked a lot about groups, and I don't want to give the perception that I go into teams and I constantly work with groups,
Yeah.
because that's not how it is.
Yeah.
In the beginning, though, again, this was all new. And so we were kind of getting our bearings. And like my example of a million years ago with 120 guys at the Pittsburgh Pirates, I don't do that anymore, not even if they ask me.
Yeah.
But because now I know it doesn't, there isn't enough value, risk versus reward, right? So especially when you have, a strength coach, or if a bunch of the guys are saying, oh, we've been dealing with back pain. Let's do stuff to stretch out our backs.
Mm-hmm.
That I avoid like the
Yeah.
plague. If a group of guys who wants to do back stretches.
Yeah.
So, I've learned over the years, as that there are myriad reasons that your back is bothering you.
Yeah.
And especially if I have a group, I'm not going to be able to watch how everyone is moving. And the chance that I'm going to do more harm than good for some of the people in that room, regardless of the expertise I may have, that there's a really good chance that we're going to end up doing more harm than good, because I just can't manage people. If you have pain, and even if there are multiple people in a group who have pain in the same area, it may not have the same cause. And that's just irresponsible for me to be like, all right, yeah, let's just do, a back pain relief session. They
Yeah.
might, if I'm really careful, they might leave feeling good, but did I fix anything? No, I
Yeah.
just gave them temporary relief. So that's one of the things that's a challenge, right? Because
Yeah.
that back pain is so common.
Yeah.
So in cases like that, it's like, all right, well, how could we break this up? Let's say I have an hour and there are 12 guys that were going to be in this, and, 6 of them are saying they really wanted to do something with back pain. Well, all right, how about if we break up this hour and, I'm going to do some basic mobility with these guys, because they're about to go do an upper body lift. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to prep them for that.
Mm-hmm.
You guys just, chill out, come back in half an hour, whatever it is. Then I'll take the few people and we'll go over, probably in that half an hour, we'll maybe go over 3 things, because out of these 3 things, maybe one will resonate with each of them and I can manage it. But it doesn't end up being like, oh yeah, we're going to do yoga for back pain with this group of guys.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of,
Yeah.
that's been a huge evolution in how I handle things that's so far away from yoga now.
Yeah.
if that makes sense. Does
Absolutely.
that?
No,
Yeah.
I think it's great ideas. And what specific to like shoulders and elbows, what are some, I mean, like I know for me, like you'll see a lot of hypermobile guys. So,
Yes.
if you're not careful, you can look around the room and see a bunch of, athletes who are in elbow hyperextension, just destroying the backs of their elbows in like a weight supported position or anything like that. What are some other things that you look for from just like a coaching competency standpoint as you look around, even whether it's a group of 2 or a group of 15?
Um, well, I mean, just going back to what you were
Yeah.
saying though about shoulders and
Yeah.
elbows, because I'll get a lot of guys who are looking for shoulder stretches,
Yeah.
and I get yoga instructors constantly
Yeah.
asking me about what are your best stretches for shoulder stretches for pitchers, and my answer unequivocally is always none, none.
Yeah.
I don't ever stretch shoulders because I mean that's well, I want to stay in my lane and for the most part, any kind of tension that you're finding in a shoulder, there's a reason for it. It's not just because of overuse or,
Yeah.
there's a dysfunction or a compensation that's happening that we need to figure out that then will release that tension and give the mobility back to the shoulder because it's such a mobile joint. So I have no business stretching anybody's shoulders. And then also, we haven't really talked about the PRI stuff,
Yeah.
but the value in restoring someone's breathing mechanics and getting their rib cage in a better position. I mean, that has a huge impact on shoulder mobility. So that if I work on that,
Yeah.
then I can restore so much more shoulder mobility in a safe and functional way than if I just start, willy nilly doing these stretches that might feel good, but then I might be creating laxity that's going to create
Yeah.
instability. And so yeah,
You're always
but
better off being too tight than you are too loose. I mean, I think that's a very gross generalization because we both know that tight and loose can mean a lot of different things, but I'd always prefer to have a little bit of stability to fall back on as opposed to having to like make up range of motion where there's too much passive range and you have to pick it up actively because that's a neural adaptation that takes time. Whereas tissue extensibility, you can get those really translating. Would you agree with that or would you see it through a different lens?
oh no, I would absolutely agree with that. And when I've had conversations like that with yoga
Mm-hmm.
people, they don't love that at
Yeah.
all. Why would I say that I would prefer someone to be more tight than loose?
Yeah.
But I've said that and especially I feel that way in particular if we're looking at, and I don't do a whole lot of stuff anymore that's like sport specific,
Mm-hmm.
but in this example, like NBA players, I just find that they don't need this massive range of motion.
Yeah.
It's just not, it's not something that I'm working on. Like I'm not doing Russian splits with
Yeah.
NBA players for any reason.
Yeah. So here's a question for you. Like group classes, they can be great for camaraderie and adherence. And like everybody, like when I came out of grad school, I worked at a commercial gym and I always remember like this at 6 a.m. there was like a hot yoga class and you'd have people that'd be like, oh my gosh, it's so relaxing. You'd have people come out like that was a great strength workout. You had other people that called it like power yoga. And I always was like, you know what? There's this like, you have people going in here and they're all walking out with different like goals. Like I remember thinking like, why would you get up and go to yoga to relax? Like what's more relaxing than sleeping? But, that's my soapbox moment. But one of the things I think the point is that, group classes can be great for camaraderie, for adherence, but sometimes create problems when you have 30, general population people or athletes all doing the same exercises. So I'm curious when you are stuck with one of those larger groups, it's obviously not ideal, but do you have certain guardrails when working with a number of athletes all at once, like exercises you avoid because they're too complex to teach in a group environment? Like if there's a yoga instructor listening to this, like what are the stay away from this, and this that you would say are important rules to live by?
Oh, well, I mean, so if it's for a yoga instructor, it's
Yep.
basically stay away from most traditional yoga poses because I would say that almost every single thing that I do, although it's based on may look somewhat like a yoga pose, it's not, there is not a single exercise that I teach anymore that is taught the same way as it would be taught in a yoga class. So let's give the example of Pigeon. Because everybody's pretty familiar with Pigeon.
Yeah.
And if you were to Google, especially if you Google like an athlete doing Pigeon, or I don't know the exact search terms, but I'm sure I've done it before. I think it's like, just do athlete in Pigeon pose. Cause you want to make sure it's a guy for sure though, because they tend to be tighter. And what they're going to be doing is cranking into their lumbar spine, because in Pigeon, if you're upright, for those people who aren't familiar with Pigeon pose, if you had your right shin in front, and they would always teach you want your right shin parallel with the top of your mat, and then your left leg would be in behind you, like you were doing a split behind you. And because most people don't have enough hip mobility to be able to be in that position comfortably, what you're going to end up doing is pushing your weight forward. And where is that weight going to end up? If it's your right leg in front, it's going to end up in your right knee. But now to be upright, to look like, the yoga Pigeon on the cover of Yoga Journal, you're going to come upright. But how are you going to do that? Because your weight is pushed forward. So you're going to hinge at your low back. So you're going to be in this excessive lordosis in your lumbar spine. So now we've got the two areas that we tend to compensate when we don't have hip mobility, that we're just crushing in that position. But it looks good. Right?
I always joke, it looks if you actually go and look at the picture, so the first thing that came up on Pinterest is a dude doing obviously a Pigeon pose. If you actually compare that to like a McMurray's test for medial meniscus pathology, they actually look shockingly similar. So you're effectively putting people into a provocative test for knee pathology in many cases. It's crazy.
That's hilarious. Yeah.
But I mean, I'm sure that's like the tip of the iceberg, and you could go in a million different directions with that. But you might get someone who has anteverted hips who could never come even close to that. So, would you say that just avoiding any aggressive end ranges is a good rule of thumb for most coaches in this regard?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And just sticking with the basics, because there's so much that they can get out of learning the basics. I mean, it's surprising to me, especially when it's like a major league guy, clearly not one who's worked with you, but like a major league guy who doesn't understand how to effectively reach and release his hip flexor. He thinks that the only way to get in there is if you're digging in there. And I'm not saying that soft tissue doesn't work, because it's helpful, but it's part of the overall strategy. All of these components, like what I offer, is not the be all end all. It needs to be integrated, and in order to be effective. And so when someone's like, yeah, I have super tight hip flexors, but they don't understand the relationship between their glutes and their hip flexors, or even that their pelvis needs to move in order to be able to access to release their hip flexors. And just so going over, like, keeping it simple, but educating them at the same time. Education can go a long way. As long as, again, you keep it in simplest terms. I remember the first time I met you, Eric, and you spoke to me. I mean, you've spoken to me in similar terms during this podcast that you did when I first met you. And I'm so proud of myself, because I understood everything you were saying now, but back then I had no idea. Like, it was completely over my head. And so just making sure that now that I know so much more than I knew back then, that I still speak in simplest terms when I'm talking to athletes. And I know for you that you talk differently to a peer than you would, obviously an athlete, but don't be afraid though to educate them. There's a difference between, educating in simplest terms and, talking over their heads so that they just, glaze over, or not giving them the information that would actually empower them to understand how the exercise is working. So I think it's important to do that.
And I'm also curious. Like a lot of times we'll have an athlete that comes to town and, they have a great response to manual therapy with us. And then they live in Nebraska. So, they're asking, hey, how do I find a good manual therapist close to home? So, I'll like cross-reference like the provider locator from activerelease.com with the one on grassingtechnique.com. And then I'll, find 4 or 5 candidates and I'll go and I'll stalk their bios for what I want to see and all that stuff. So I'm curious, are there things that, let's say somebody in Oklahoma is listening to this podcast and they want to find like a mobility expert that they can consult with to kind of complement the training they're doing. Are there certain things that you think are important for them to look out for and almost like vetting those individuals? Like what are red flags for you? What are things that you really look at and are like, all right, this is someone who's invested in themselves and could be a real rock star?
Yes. Yeah. Because I get this oftentimes, when players are, during the off season, they go home and they're asking me, how can I do what we've been doing, with someone else? In a lot of cases we have videos and they know the exercise, and because my stuff is integrated, we're able to do that. But if they want to go take like a mobility class or a yoga class, then we start looking at places around them. And then I'm looking at bios to see, do they have like FMS? If they have FMS, if they've even, made an attempt to branch out into an area like that, that's a good sign. Red flags are if it's all just yoga. It's just, and then maybe they happen to work with one athlete that walked in. And so they've listed that they worked with an athlete, but if you look at their actual education, it's all yoga. There's nothing based in anatomy or biomechanics, but I mean, FMS is so accessible that it's nice when I see that. But I also do like when I see that, a lot of times you'll find a yoga instructor who's also, even if they're also a personal trainer, it's still better.
Yeah.
Obviously there are different degrees of personal trainer, like ACE versus NASM versus NSCA. I mean, there are different levels there, but what else was I going to say? Personal trainer. Oh, massage therapist. Oftentimes they'll be dual, like a yoga instructor and a massage therapist.
Yeah.
At least then I know that they know muscles.
Yeah.
So that's a good sign.
Yeah. Manual therapy skills. So if you have palpation skills, everything else seems to be easier. Like I think that's a big thing I've noticed over the years. When you see strength coaches who have gone to massage therapy school, I know the Diamondbacks have sent a lot of their coaches to do that over the years and have like a great coaching tree that's trickled down underneath Ken Crenshaw and Nate Shaw and all them. So I think there's something to be said about that. I think that's a really good point you just made.
Oh yeah, for sure. I love, you just said, I love Nate Shaw. I love what he does there. And yeah,
great
really
people.
great.
So we've gone in a million different directions, but I want to hear about your latest projects because I know you got some cool stuff that came out over the past year and stuff that's more recently. Talk to me about educational programs, equipment design, anything else you got going on.
All right. Well, one of those things, and you were the one who introduced me to this, was PRI. Remember? That was at least 10 years ago, right?
And we're dating ourselves really bad right now.
Yeah, we are, for sure. And I went really deep down the PRI rabbit hole, and I found a lot of value in the information, but I just couldn't find a lot of practical application in the context. We've talked a lot about where I'm working, and, I'm in the corner of a weight room and it's hard to have a conversation and people are stepping over us, that kind of thing. I don't always have access to a table. Forget it. I don't always have access like to a wall to even do like 90-90 at the wall. And so I've spent a lot of time trying to bring it down to lowest common denominator. I mean, it's breathing. I saw the value. I saw the potential of what it could do for players. But I needed to make it as efficient and effective in the context of my work that I could. And so I ended up creating some of my own exercises to be able to apply it without needing a table, without needing, a whole lot of explanation, even because I've got to work with Latin players where, all I know is a Reba and a Bajo. I can get them up and down and count to 10,
Yep.
So I had to come up with some ways to apply it easily. And now it's been almost 5 years of using my own approach, kind of my own take on PRI. And as you know, on the Perform Better, this is my fifth year on the Perform Better Summit tour, where I've been doing the same talk because it's so popular. And so many people have also taken PRI and felt the same way that I did, where, you know what, if I was a clinician, I could rock this, but I'm not. I'm a personal trainer, or I'm a coach, and, you know, I have other responsibilities, but I want to be able to leverage the power of breathing biomechanics. And so I put together what I call Breathe Better 101. It's an online course, and it just expands on the presentations that I've been doing, both the lecture and the hands-on. And it includes all of the primary exercises that I do with all the coaching cues, also how to program them. And that's been out now for about 6 months, and the feedback on it has been phenomenal. Like, it just blows me away. It's so humbling. And I get several emails a week about people, because I tell them, please tell me, you know, how this works with your clients, your experience with it. And it's amazing. Because again, when you can break down complex things into simplest terms and make them understandable, I mean, this is breathing. We're all doing it. We could all be doing it better, but it's not, as my husband loves to say, it's not rocket surgery. I got him a t-shirt that says that, and it's got them performing surgery on a rocket. But anyway, yeah. So Breathe Better 101, it's not rocket surgery. So that I'm super proud of, and I recommend, as many people, if you're interested in breathing, if you've taken PRI, you really loved the concepts, but you want a practical application of what you learned. I think I've done a decent job with that. So that one,
where can folks find that? Just so that, what's the best place to check it out?
That's on the programs page of my website, mobilitymaker.com. If you go to the programs page, but then also, it's in the link tree on my Instagram. There's a link to it right there too. Yep. Awesome. And then I have other programs that are going to be coming out this year. And in addition to that, and you know about this because, you helped me out with it, the YIT method for athletes coaching certification will finally come out this year. Awesome. That's been a long time coming. And YIT just stands for Yoga Inspired Training. And so, yeah, I'm pretty proud of that. I just need to get that across the finish line for everyone. And I've talked about it. And so I get a lot of emails from people saying, when's that coming out? And so that is definitely coming out in the next several months. But I also want to make sure we have all the accreditation so that you can get, NSCA credits, NASM, ACE, all those things. So we're working on that as well. I have my book, Practical Solutions for Back Pain Relief, that came out a couple years ago. But then
great read. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And it's a quick read, and it's one of those books like you kind of go through, and as you read it, it's like you're hopping down on the floor and trying things out. So, excellent and very good. Like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think it's a good entry level exposure to the worlds of Dana Santis, like where they can like test the waters, and it's, super affordably priced, but, realize that you have a lot to offer, and then, they can take the next step and look into bigger things later. Right.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. And that was written for the general population. So you just have to keep that in mind. And that's why, definitely entry level and very practical. That's why I wanted to make sure it said practical in the, title for that book. I didn't plan on writing a book on back pain. The publisher actually came to me because of an article I had done for CNN and said, hey, can we turn this article into a book? And so I was like, all right. So, but yes, the end result was good. I have another book I'm working on right now, with human kinetics. They asked me to write a book on breathing. So basically what I'm doing is taking that Breathe Better 101 information and turning it into a book form. And, I'm a little behind on it, but that should be done. That will be done, this year, and it should publish by the end of the year. So you should look for that. And then also, I just had a piece of equipment come out. It's called the Mobility Maker Bench. So it's kind of named after me, since my nickname is Mobility Maker. And this piece of equipment I'm really excited about, because I wanted I wanted a piece of mobility equipment that really took that stigma out of mobility, that looked like other gym equipment, like fits into the weight room. Just like, I had to fit into the weight room with what I was doing. I wanted this piece of equipment to be like a little version of me. Well, actually, it's a meteor version of me. And so that it was versatile. You could use it for so many different things. I mean, there are dozens and dozens of exercises, Eric, that you can do on this. I'm super proud of it.
The promo reel is really cool.
It's a saddle and a spoiler. I mean, this is what we called it and when we were putting it all together, but it has an adjustable saddle, and I made it so that it can accommodate people from 7 feet tall, and like guys that I worked with in the NBA, but also the WWE, to people my size. And, I'm 5'2" on my tippy toes. So it's really versatile. And it's not just about mobility either. I mean, I designed it for mobility exercises, but I have a garage gym that I really love to spend my time in. As much as I'm in all these awesome, sports complexes, I don't work out with the athletes. So I had to have a place where I could work out. And I love this for a garage gym because it has vertical storage. Like you can stand it up. It doesn't have a huge footprint, but you can also do hip thrusting with it. You can do anything you would do with a Roman chair. Not that I previously had a Roman chair, but it's kind of like a Swiss Army knife, a split squat stand. Anything you do with a split squat stand, you can do with this because of its adjustability. So
versatile.
I'm pretty excited. That's been a couple of years in the making.
It looks awesome.
Result, came out sweet.
And there's a great trailer for it too that kind of demos a ton of the stuff. So it's that's a good one. Folks can find that at Sorinex as well. So definitely an exciting time. And folks can find out more about you. It's either mobilitymaker.com and then your Mobility Maker on both Twitter and Instagram. Instagram content is outstanding. There's always good stuff every day. You're very prolific there. So I always keep an eye on it and learn a lot too. So, but this was awesome, Dana. Thanks so much for coming on and spending some time with us.
Oh, I appreciate it.
We'll have to do it again and update this because I know you're someone that always is like getting exposed to more educational opportunities and evolving just like we all should. So let's put it in the calendar for 2022 and we'll crush it again.
For sure.
All right. Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd be thrilled if you'd consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving us a review to read on iTunes. We welcome your suggestions for future guests and questions. Just email elitebaseballpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for your continued support, and we'll see you next episode.